Today we'll be working in my workbook called Joseph, Son, Slave, Prisoner, and Commander. This workbook covers Genesis 37 to 41, chapters 37 through 41. Looking at the table of contents, we have already done the first four chapters. We started with Joseph when he was 17, or just before his 17, when he had his dreams that really irritated his brother a huge amount. And so they were so upset that at age of 17, they sell Joseph into slavery. And they sell him to Ishmaelite traders who sell him in Egypt, and he becomes a slave in Egypt. He becomes a slave to Potiphar, and he excels at that job, and so he does well there. Then we get a side story as that's happening. We hear the story about Judah and Tamar, and an interesting story. I believe it was probably inserted because Judah is the line in the Messiah, and Tamar is also in the line of the Messiah, and how these two are come together, since technically they wouldn't normally do that, since she is starts off as his daughter-in-law. It is an interesting story, deals with kinsman, redeemer, and all these things. So it's an interesting story. There's also a little problem there, which is why the timeline of Judah's life and the various issues come up. So we solve a biblical problem in that chapter. Then in chapter 4, Potiphar's wife wants to seduce Joseph, and he won't fall for it. So she ends up accusing him anyway. So Potiphar puts him in prison. Remember, Potiphar is the captain of the guard in charge of the prisons as well. So now we come to chapter 5, which is the cupbearer and baker of the king. So cupbearer and baker of the king, Genesis 40, 1 through 23. Genesis 41. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. What is the time reference in this story compared to the previous story? Some time later. How long a time is unknown, but it was long enough for Joseph to be well established in the prison. Who was put in the prison where Joseph was? The chief cupbearer and the chief baker. A cupbearer was a person who poured the drink for the king and for the king's table. He was often required to swallow some of the drink before serving it to verify the drink was not poisonous. The baker was in charge of making breads and pastries. Why were they thrown in prison? Because the Pharaoh was angry with them. Probably there's a plot to kill the king, and the king had identified two possible suspects, the cupbearer and the baker. The reason why we believe this is the whole premise of the story by the end. It gives that impression. Who assigned these two men to Joseph? The captain of the guard, which had been Potiphar. Who is the captain of the guard? Okay, I answered that. It's Potiphar. The good treatment of Joseph in prison tends to indicate that Potiphar did not truly believe the story his wife told. The scriptures continue. Genesis 40, 4b. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, I'm going to turn off my phone here so it doesn't make that kind of noise. Okay. Who were being held in prison had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. We had another time reference. What does it say in this scripture? After they had been in custody for some time. We always think of the story as happening in a short time, but it really could have been at least a year. What did they both have the same night? A dream. Can God talk to us in a dream? When is a dream more than just a dream? According to Christian Lehman, there are three types of dreams explained in the Bible. One, a dream can be just subconscious processing of what's going on. Isaiah 29, 7 through 8. It is with a dream, with a vision in the night, as when a hungry person dreams of eating, but awakens hungry still, as when a thirsty person dreams of drinking, but awakens faint and thirsty still. Or a dream can be a spiritual attack or evil false messaging. Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 3. If a prophet or one who foretells by dreams appears among you, announces to you a sign and wonder, and if that sign and wonder spoken of takes place, and the prophet says, let us follow other gods, gods you have not known, and let us worship them, you must not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer. Or a dream can be an important message from God. Normally, a message from God would not have to do with a person's individual life unless it's part of God's overall plan, as in this case. Dreams from God only come once or twice in a lifetime. For instance, Daniel had several visions, but only one dream. Genesis 46. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? We both had dreams, they answered, but there's no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. What did Joseph see when he came to check on them the next morning? That they were both dejected. Why were they sad? They both had dreams, but they didn't know how to interpret them. Apparently, the dreams disturbed them enough that they felt the dreams were important. Does Joseph state that he has ability to interpret dreams, or does he give that ability to someone else? He gives it to someone else. He says the Lord is able to do that, or God. Did Joseph already have a history of important dreams? And definitely he had dreams when he was 15 or 16. Has Joseph seen the result of his dreams in 37 come to pass yet? No, he hasn't. So I don't know that he has any evidence that his dreams come true, unless he's done other interpretation of dreams. Yet does Joseph lack any confidence in interpreting what God means in these dreams of the cupbearer and baker? No. Why do you think? Either he's done other interpretations or he has such confidence in God that he feels like he can do this. Genesis 49. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, in my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine was 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup and put the cup in his hand. Who was first to tell Joseph his dream? The chief cupbearer. What type of fruit is shown in the dream? Grapes. Although the dream is making grape juice as it's coming right out of the vine, it really means wine. How many branches were on the vine? 3. Who did he squeeze the grapes for? The king, or Pharaoh. Is the scene in the dream a positive one or a negative one? It seems like a positive one. If you were to interpret it, what would you think it would mean? That he's a cupbearer, and he's filling wine cups. That was all I could say on that. Is the number of branches significant in your interpretation? It may be significant, but I don't know where I'd put it in my interpretation. We have dreams all the time. Why do you think the cupbearer felt that this was an important one? Because he's hoping to be released from prison, and he just feels sometimes I think dreams that are important are very strongly emphasized, so strong you can hardly let them go. Maybe that's why. Scriptures continue. Genesis 40:12. This is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. What do the 3 branches indicate? The 3 days. What's going to happen to the cupbearer in 3 days? In 3 days, he's going to be taken out of prison. what do you think Joseph means when he says Pharaoh will lift up your head? Right now, he's in disgrace because he's in the prison. And lift up your head, make you no longer a disgrace. That's my opinion. But will be just like the dream in the cupbearer's life in 3 days. Just like the dream, you'll put a Pharaoh's cup in his hand, um, just like you used to. In 3 days, these three will know if Joseph's interpretation of the dream is correct. Is there any hesitation in Joseph's part regarding the interpretation of the dream, since the only prophetic dream we have seen him have has yet to come true, and in his mind at this time, perhaps it never will? Um, there is no hesitation in Joseph's part. Why do you think this is? Because he's following God. Genesis 40:14. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of Hebrews, and even here I've done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. What does Joseph want the cupbearer to do when he's restored into his position? Um, Mention him to the Pharaoh and get him out of the prison. Why is he appealing to Pharaoh when it's Potiphar that put him into prison? Um, don't know. Maybe maybe only Pharaoh can release them. I don't know. Do you think Joseph believes that Potiphar will never let him leave the prison? Yes, as long as he's married to his wife, I don't think he'll release him from the prison. How does Joseph describe how he got to Egypt? I was forcibly carried off from the land of Hebrews. Does Joseph tell who put him into slavery? No. What does Joseph say about the reason he's in prison? Nothing, I have done nothing wrong to deserve being put into prison. Joseph doesn't actually call it a prison, but what? A dungeon. How is a dungeon different than a prison? It may not be anything different other than the dungeon would be down below ground instead of above ground. Why does Joseph describe it as a dungeon? Well, of course, he's confined underground and for no reason whatsoever. The scriptures continue. Genesis 40:16. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my basket were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of my basket on my head. It appears that the chief baker may not have told Joseph his dream, but based on what did he decide to do so? The fact that Chief Baker's dream turned out so well. How many baskets of bread are on his head? 3 baskets of bread. What was in the basket? All kinds of baked goods for the Pharaoh. What happened to the bread in the basket? The birds ate the bread out of the basket. Is the scene in a dream a positive or negative one? A negative one. If you were to interpret it, what would you think it would mean? Well, something negative, not positive. I don't know. Maybe in 3 days, something's going to happen to him. Is the number of baskets significant in your interpretation? Well, I would say it's the same, similar to the other one, but are the birds significant? Well, they're taking away the bread. So it does seem like more of a nightmare instead of a good dream. Genesis 40:18. This is what it means. Joseph said, the 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. What do the 3 baskets indicate? 3 days. What will happen to the baker in 3 days? Pharaoh will take off his head. What do the birds signify? That they will eat away at your flesh. What does the baker's head in the dream signify? That it will be taken off. Looking at the question 3 on page 62, what can you now conclude? I don't know what 62, 3 on 62. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. I believe looking at the question on 3 on page 62, if the theory was correct, we now can conclude the baker had something to do with the threat on the life of Pharaoh. Okay, so the question 3 is has to do with there was a plot against Pharaoh, and now it appears that the baker had to do with that plot. Does Joseph lighten the severity of the dream by saying, I'm sorry, but I think, or I can be wrong. Please get a second opinion, but here's what I see? No, he doesn't. Why? Because he knows for sure that his dream is true. Therefore, a true prophet of God will see the bad as well as the good. Yes, I'm glad this isn't my gift. That would be horrible. Genesis 40:20. Now on the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all of his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup in Pharaoh's hand. And he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot about him. What was on the third day regarding the Pharaoh? It was his birthday. What did Pharaoh do for his birthday? He brought up both the chief baker and the cupbearer out of prison. Did Pharaoh bring both the baker and cupbearer out of prison? Yes. What happened to both the baker and cupbearer? The baker was killed, and the cupbearer was able to give cups in Pharaoh's hand again. And what did Pharaoh do for his birthday? He had a feast. What did Joseph ask the cupbearer to do? To remember him to the Pharaoh. Did the cupbearer remember Joseph? No, he did not. This was probably frustrating to Joseph, as it would be to us in the same situation. But with God, there's always a right time for everything. So now we come to the crossword. All right, 2 men were put in prison, the cupbearer and the baker. Number 4, the 3 branches in cupbearer's dream mean 3 days. Number 6, both the cupbearer and the baker were assigned in prison to Joseph. Number 7, Joseph said he had done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. Number 8, there were 3 branches on the vine in the cupbearer's dream. 3 branches, yes. Number 9, what was in the top basket of the baker? Bread. Number 12, a dream can be an important message from God. Yes. 13, what kept eating the bread out of the basket in the baker's dream? Birds. Okay, 1 down. The third day after the dream was the Pharaoh's birthday. In the dream, the cupbearer took the grapes and squeezed them into the Pharaoh's cup. Both the cupbearer and the baker were sad because they thought that there was no one who could interpret their dreams. 10, both the cupbearer and the baker had dreamed the same night. 11, the Pharaoh gave a feast for his officials on his birthday. And that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.